is up, YouTube? Today we are talking about the Santa Cruz Bullit. Yeah, so let's just jump right into it. So this is my large Santa Cruz Bullit. This is my big heavy-duty e-bike. I went with the GX Axis kit. I think that's kind of the sweet spot. It's expensive. We'll talk about value in a second too. But I wanted, at the very least, the Performance Elite suspension. I don't know. These days, I don't really see the need to buy the Kashima stuff or get the kits that are all Kashimaed out, especially when you're not saving weight. The performance gain I will never actually notice. And if I don't know. I do not notice the difference in my suspension performance based on the color of the stanchion. If you notice the suspension performance difference because of the color and coating on your stanchion, please let me know and tell me what that feels like, because I've yet to realize the extra money spent on that. So anyway, this is, again, the GX Axis kit. So Performance Elite suspension. It's got the GX Axis, the beeps and the boops for the shifting, which all works really well. Personally, I would have gone for the T90 kit without the battery if it had the Performance Elite suspension, but it's only about $1,000 less. And I don't know, this feels like a slightly better value when related to the value of other Santa Cruz bicycles. Again, this is not a value budget-oriented brand. It's boutique, it's high-end, so you're never getting the most bang for your buck here. It's, if you want to ride a Santa Cruz, then you pay to play. It's got the Maven Bronze stoppers, which have been incredible. At first, the Mavens, I think, were too strong, and I did not get along with them very well. But after kind of like riding for a little while and understanding just how powerful these brakes are and how hard to pull on the lever, they've become some of my favorite really quickly. They come with the reserve alloy wheels. This is not a reserve alloy wheel. I switched out the front wheel because I was playing around with a podium fork for a little while. But a quick note on the reserve alloys. I think that they dent just as easy as other alloy rims in their category. However, the reserve warranty is still really good for these. It's not great because they don't send you a new wheel like they used to, but it's really good because if the dent in your rim fails to continue to hold air, they will replace the rim and send you a nipple kit and a $100 voucher to have your local bike shop rebuild it. $100 isn't really enough to have an LBS rebuild a wheel, but it's better than nothing. And I don't see a lot of companies out there replacing aluminum rims because they just get bent and beat up so much harder and easier than carbon ones. The best part of this kit so far, I think, is the smart choice of not just a rear double down casing tire, but a front double down casing tire. These e-bikes, long travel, almost 50 pounds, just about 50 pounds with pedals. And, you're just nuking them downhill as hard as you can, lap after lap after lap. It just doesn't make sense to try to save a couple of grams when you're just going to blow through an original equipment tire and have to replace it. And tires are not cheap anymore. I just replaced a tire on my other bike and it was $104 retail. So anyway, cheers to Santa Cruz for, if you're going to make us spend this much on a Santa Cruz, at least you're giving us the double down tire. So thank you for that. That's enough about the kit. We'll kind of get into the Geo. I went with a large. Again, if you've heard me talk about this before, I'm sorry, but I'm 6'1". So at 6'1", depending on the brand, I can go either way. For most brands, actually, I'm never pigeonholed. Like the XL always does feel a little more stable and a little quicker, and the large feels a little more accessible and playful. I don't know, for the past year, I've been sizing down, but historically I've sized up. This large comes in, the reach is in the high position, 480 mil. In the low position, it's 477 mil. The stack is a generous 640 mil, and the head tube angle in the high position is 63.6 degrees in the high position. In the low position, the head tube angle is 63.3. And I think it's too slack. That's just me. I feel at times, especially in like flat terrain when I'm just trying to connect trail to trail, that the front wheel is just like too far out there. Yeah, and I'll talk about that in climbing a little bit too, because it affects the climbing. But anyway, it's not I still get along with the bike very, very well, but I do think anything past that 63.8, 63.6, like, I don't know. I notice it. This is where I think you hit the diminishing point of return for even an enduro sled for the head tube angle. The chain stays on a large, they're size specific. God bless you, Santa Cruz. The chain stays for the large are 446, and I think on the small they're 440. So generous across the range. It's not just, some XL bikes out there or large bikes have chain stays like around 430 mil, and 446 on a large is pretty balanced. I get along with that really well, and a 1280 mil wheelbase, which again, pretty expected from a big long bike like this, and not crossing that 1300 mil threshold for the wheelbase. Anyway, as far as climbing goes, normally I don't like to share too many notes about climbing for these bikes because it's an e-bike. Why do you get the huge e-bike? Well, because it's got a motor on it. A lot of people at the bike shop were like, oh, we love the Vala. We love the Vala. And I'm like, good for you. Enjoy your Vala. And I'm sure the Vala on more kind of everyday tame trails feels a little more accessible and easier to get off the ground and just kind of like bob and weave throughout the trails. But I buy e-bikes to go to very steep terrain and have fun on challenging terrain where I normally wouldn't like to be pedaling all day. So as far as a climber, it has a motor, and also it's got modern geometry, meaning you have a very steep effective seat tube angle, which keeps you nice and forward on the bike. The longer chain stays keep you nice and supported, even in the steep areas where the bike wants to kind of pop up. That rear center, that rear axle is pretty far behind your butt, giving you nice support, making you feel really stable. The only place I don't really love it climbing is tight switchbacks. And I really think that has to do with how slack it is. I'm coming into a tight switchback often at speed because it has a motor. And it's like, oh, shoot, I've got to like downshift and take this really slow and be really careful because that front wheel will want to kind of get away from me. And there are times where I pedal dab on this bike that I don't on other bikes. And again, I think it's just, it's pretty dang slack. But otherwise, it's got, we'll touch on the motor here real quick. This is the latest generation Bosch Performance CX motor, which I find very predictable. I love that little like boost after you're done pedaling to like get you over technical terrain. That's always really helpful. You don't have to be in a super high cadence, which is nice because if you come up to a switchback at 20 miles an hour and you kind of got to grind through the switchback, there's still power delivery even if you're stuck in a really hard gear and forgot to shift. The battery life is okay, but that's because it's a 600 watt hour battery. That was a big point of contention for a lot of the early reviewers. I will say, if I notice I'm burning through battery really quickly, I'll just dial back the assistance. And by the time I've drained the battery, I'm usually pretty much done riding. If I continue riding, it's like very low quality descending. And if I'm really getting after it, I'm not riding safe anymore anyways. So the battery lasts just about as long as I last. And that's a good while, depending on the trail system. That could be 4,200 feet of climbing. It could be 5,000 feet of climbing in very steep terrain. And I'm not light. I'm 200 pounds. So I think, that speaks a lot to the efficiency of it. I know there's more efficient motors out there, but I really trust Bosch. Bosch has been at this for quite a while. If you didn't know it, they do a couple of other things outside of the e-mountain bike world. So they're a company that's going to be around and support their consumers. Now, on days where I really do feel like getting it, I bring the little range extender. I don't really notice the weight of the range extender too much. Today I rode with it because I forgot to charge my battery and I wanted to get a couple laps in. And so I got up there and I was like, oh shoot, well, I've got my range extender. And I was still able to get about 2,000 feet of climbing in today. Had a very short window, and that equated to about 55 minutes of riding, which is just perfect little lunch break. That's the motor, the efficiency, all that fun stuff. I think it's e-bikes are in a really good place. All of this comes in just under 50 pounds too. So again, if you want a big 800 watt hour battery, not only are you increasing the weight, which isn't that big of a deal, it's where you're increasing that weight. So that battery likes to come way up past, almost to the head tube, whereas this one ends probably somewhere around here, keeping that weight, that center of gravity really nice and low. Descending, At first, I was pretty skeptical of the Float X because I'm a big burly rider and I need the biggest, burliest suspension. But I will say it's really reliable, much more reliable than the X2 in my experience, in my shop's experience, and probably in your experience too. So it's been really reliable, albeit a little more sporty than the X2 or other suspension for big travel bikes. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. This bike is just kind of sporty on the downhill. So it's a big bike, 160 mil rear, 170 mil front, and it feels like it in most places, but I would say it's on the sportier side, not the kind of brawler, ultra plush, plow side of things. It's a big bike, but it's really accessible and you don't have to be going mock chicken to access that fun. So rather than seeking out the highest speed gnarly lines, this bike is looking for little things to like kick off of. It loves big drops. It kills that kind of like, it's always been like a very soft landing on big drops for me. I will say when you start going really fast and start to rally through technical terrain, I feel that even with the longer chainstays and the super slack front end, the bike starts to deflect a little bit. And maybe that has to do with frame stiffness or some other magic going on here. But I don't think it lends itself to like flat out speed. It's definitely more of like a jumper, pop around, really fun, really confident in the drops. That high stack, you always feel like, you're not getting too far forward going off of lips, which is nice. And much like the VPP bikes that Santa Cruz makes, it's a very intuitive jumper. I will say the VPP jumps better. I wish that they could have figured out a VPP scenario instead of the 4-bar, but it isn't that big of a compromise. In some ways, it's no compromise, but in terms of like how perfect Santa Cruz bikes normally jump, I think it's a little bit of a compromise. That said, it's still a perfectly capable jumper. I think where this bike excels, though, is learning to drop, approaching drops, not feeling very shy of going off of the edge of something. The high stack, the position of the bike, and the way that it feels when it lands is all very inspiring. And I've hit some very big drops on this that I haven't hit on other bikes, be it e-bike or not. So that's really fun. Now, comparing this bike to others, I have also recently, really my best comparison, my only comparison right now is the most recent version of the Orbea Wild. And I think it's a great comparison because I ordered that Wild in the smaller battery spec. It's either 600 or 625 watt hour. I got like a very similar life expectancy out of the battery between the two bikes. They were both kind of just sub 50 pounds. And the Wild had more of like a lower stack and an aggressive like race position, and it didn't deflect as easily. I think that there was, I don't know, however that like frame is built, it just wanted to go as fast as humanly possible. And that's where that bike shone. And that's where that bike was really fun. And on the other side of that coin, that Orbea Wild would kind of sacrifice, being as confidence inspiring on the jumps, on the drops, and everything in between. It's not to say you're not going to do it, but you're going to lean more into the speed demon that the Wild is. And certainly, like, you can take this to the grave. I will never race e-bikes. I barely race bikes as it is. If in a parallel universe, I am there and I'm racing e-bikes, and it's between these two, I'm racing the Orbea Wild. If I just want to party and have fun with my friends and kind of like mess around on bigger, sketchier drops, this is the bike I want. So that's really the main, and just kind of like ask yourself what kind of rider you are. So here we go again. Who is this bike for? Well, I think, again, it's for the rider that doesn't want to go mock chicken. It's for the rider who wants to pop off of everything, hit drops, do kind of some of the free ride stuff at the park, and isn't necessarily racing their e-bike. Not that I know a ton of you out there that are, but, you could race this e-bike. If this is your e-bike, go race it. Go have fun. Don't stop yourself from doing that. Don't ever limit just because of the bike. It just doesn't lean in that direction. It's the fun bike. It's the party bike. And it's very forgiving. So yeah, drop a comment if you have any more questions, or if you want to know anything else, or if you want to be like, wow, this is the best mountain bike e-bike review video I've ever watched in my life. That would be sick. But anyways, please subscribe, like, do the things. And until next time, Peace out.